Hi, today we're talking about the doctrinal mastery lesson for 1 Corinthians 15, verses 20 through 22. Just a reminder, as we scroll down, these call-out boxes contain a lot of useful information, critical to read these. This points out here that this doctrinal mastery passage is designed to be taught after the content lesson, which is 1 Corinthians 15, 13 through 28. So doctrinal mastery lessons are taught in pairs. Make sure that you've taught the content lesson before this doctrinal mastery lesson, especially here at the beginning of the school year where you may be moving these doctrinal mastery lessons around a little bit in your schedule. So there are kind of three objectives here with this doctrinal mastery lesson, and Brother Christensen talked about these last week. Number one, memorize the doctrinal mastery reference and the key scripture phrase. Then number two, explain the doctrine. And then number three, apply this doctrine in a real life scenario. The first thing we're going to do is memorize and explain, and they have a great little memorize activity here to help us memorize the key scripture reference and the phrase for 1 Corinthians 15, 20 through 22. And here's the activity. Very simple. You get a piece of paper, write the scripture reference and the key phrase at the top. Right here is what they're going to write. Then fold the paper down. The student will fold the paper so they can't see it. And they're going to try to recreate that, write it on their own. Then check and see how close they were. Probably won't get it on the first try. Then they're going to fold it down again so they've got a blank sheet of paper. They can't see what they've written. And they're going to try to write it again. And then unfold and check, and then cover it up. Try to write it again, and see how many times it takes them to be able to get it word perfect. So a simple activity, piece of paper, a little bit of time. This is probably a 5 to 7 minute activity here to memorize the key phrase and the reference. The majority of our time in this doctrinal mastery lesson is going to be spent in practicing. In this lesson, there are two scenarios. One of them is right here with Elder Palmer, and the other one is down below in the supplemental material, and I would suggest using both of them. And here in the lesson, it suggests writing a letter to somebody in this scenario. Hold off on the letter. Let's do this practice twice, but the first time we're going to practice together as a class. And as a teacher, you're going to be able to kind of mentor and help the students as they work through this process of how do we share the gospel of Jesus Christ in a way that provides peace and comfort in these moments of grief at the loss of a loved one. So the first experience here, and we'll do this together as a class, is with Elder Palmer of the 70. He describes this experience growing up when his parents lost, through a tragic accident, one of their daughters at a lake. And the next call-out box has a really great suggestion. Divide our students into pairs or small groups and invite them to discuss the questions below, and we'll read those in just a second, that relate to the principles of acquired spiritual knowledge. Then they could be placed in groups of 3, and they would share what they learned or what they would say. So here are the questions. So as we scroll down, the act in faith, 3 questions right here that deal with act in faith. So again, students could be assigned to work on this in pairs or small groups. You can have the act in faith group, or put them in groups of 3, and then one individual in that group of 3 is the act in faith person. Another person will take examining concepts and questions with an eternal perspective. So here are the questions that they would consider. And they would use the scenario above, answering these questions. And then the third person, or the third group, depending on how you divided your class, will seek further understanding through the divinely appointed sources. And remember, the sources can be people too. So besides the places you would go to find the doctrine and find comfort, who are the people to whom you would go? And so I think that's an important thing to add here to this lesson. Second activity is right down here in the supplemental learning area. This is a really great video about a high school student who was driving and was in a car accident, and he lost one of his really good friends. So now we're going to do the letter activity. So if you scroll back up in the lesson, again, it suggests writing a letter. Imagine that you are friends with the student who was driving the car instead of one of Anne's sisters. You feel prompted to write a letter of encouragement or support. And so what are you going to write in that letter? Now, again, you've practiced with the first scenario. The students have had a chance to talk about it in small groups. They've shared with the class. You've been able to kind of correct or help them with the wording. Now they're ready to write a little letter or note. And so they're going to use the same things, the principles of acquiring spiritual knowledge, acting in faith, examining concepts and questions with an eternal perspective, and then going to divine sources. And we want to make sure that in our responses, that Jesus Christ is at the center. He's the one who provides peace and comfort. He's the one who lifts us and helps us get through challenging situations. And it's because of his resurrection that we will ultimately see our loved ones again. So we want to make sure that Jesus Christ is at the center. So again, you as a teacher have a chance to guide students in that process and make sure that Christ truly is at the center of their responses. This is a really great activity to work through with your students. 2 great scenarios. Both of them have video clips. First time practice it as a class. They'll be working in pairs and small groups to work through the scenario, and then you'll be mentoring them. The second time after watching the video, have them write a note to the driver of that car that would provide them comfort in that moment of loss. Have a great time with this lesson, and thank you for everything you do.